I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I know I did. We didn't have everybody in our family visit, but we had a good group and it was fun, and I assume yours was too. But we're back to the grind, right? Until Christmas. So here goes. I have had something on my mind all week other than just Thanksgiving, right? And that is my son. He just turned 5, and yikes. I mean, I'm a parent of a daughter and a son and another daughter. So, um, if you don't have girls, then you don't know how different boys are. And if you don't have boys, then I guess you wouldn't know the experience of raising a boy. But boy, oh boy. I'm so glad I'm not a single mom, because I don't know what I would do about his acting out. So he's 5, and he is just going through this list of issues, and I know that it's just a little trend, and he'll get over it and be his sweet self again. But it's this: whenever I ask him to do something, falls to the floor, has a fit, can't put on his own socks and shoes. My mom said my brother couldn't put his on by himself reliably until he was 13. So I guess I have some time to go. He pushes his 1-year-old sister over, steps on her hand, makes her scream. His 7-year-old sister can have the most fun of her life with him, and then a little bit later he did something mean and pushed her, punched her, or whatever. I mean, it's partially her issue. But the destruction's just another thing altogether. I mean, my daughter is a tattletale, and she comes to me and she goes, "Have you seen the bathroom?" So I walk in there, and the kid gouged, it looks like he sawed the side of my sink, I believe with a cardboard cutting knife, like those Dole ones for opening packages. But it has just a series of saw marks out of it. Great. What am I supposed to do about that? So, all the normal things, the timeouts, the taking away his game or his whatever, his electronics that he's into, taking away something he loves. I mean, spanking and stuff doesn't work. That kind of stuff does not work at all. So, I mean, without my husband there to have a stronger authority than me, it would be so hard to figure out how to discipline him. And I just keep thinking, if this wasn't just a phase, what if he became like one of those boys that we see in videos on X and YouTube and online that are just wild? That the mom said, "No, you can't have your phone," and then the kid destroys the house. This one.
Here.
Or what about this other one right here where the kid uses a hammer on their TV? I mean, is this fake? If my kid did that, yikes. It's just crazy to watch those and see what young men are, the position that they're in right now. Completely undisciplined. Parents don't know how to deal with them, and they're getting away with I wouldn't even know what to do. I'd want to send my kid to jail if he ruined my house that bad. I don't know what I would want to do. It's just it's incredible. So I've been thinking about that this week a lot because here I am with this naughty little boy who I'm trying to figure out how to turn him into, he's only 5, but eventually I want him to be a strong, masculine man who's there for his wife and children and for the community and can do something amazing and successful for the world. Right? I mean, what I guess there's a lot of things we can want for our kids, but those would be pretty high on my list. And how do we get our kids there? I don't know. So that's what we're going to talk about. I don't want to yell. The punishments I'm using don't seem to be working. He just thinks they're funny. He's obviously not in need of medication, like maybe some doctors would say. So many little boys are on medication these days. So we're going to talk about raising boys and raising them in a culture that is broken and decaying and needs strong men. We need to create those strong men now. Those 5-year-olds now are going to be the men that save our country in the future. And so how are we going to do that? So that's what this episode's going to be about. Stick with me. Hey everybody, welcome back to Homestead Republic. I'm JJ, and today we're talking about something that every parent of a boy needs to hear. And that's how to raise our sons in this broken culture and how to use old wisdom. I went back and looked up how people used to raise their sons and how to use that so that we can build this country back into the future, right? Strong men are going to create a strong country. Maybe next episode I'll do women because it's true for them too. But right now, I'm dealing with my son, and maybe some of you are too. And it's almost Christmas, and he doesn't care if Santa doesn't bring him anything. I'm sure Christmas morning he'll care, but right now, he doesn't seem to care at all. So, what do? We've got to reclaim this next generation. So, how did we lose the wisdom of how to raise our kids? I'm not really sure how it got lost along the way, but you can look around and you can see that, I mean, even millennials like myself or the generation just older than me, you can just look around and see that most of us are still children. We never hit the adulthood that, let's say, our founding fathers hit. And I mean, they founded this country when they were in their young 20s. So I wanted to look back and kind of figure out what they did different than us. Because, one of the first things I thought was that they must have beat their kids with sticks. Well, apparently, from what I read, that was pretty rare. And that was a parent that was not really the best parent, right? So that's good to know. They had other techniques. So Washington, Adams, Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, they all grew up with pretty strict parents, and they weren't raised as little fragile kids that, oh, you're going to go hurt yourself if you do anything. They weren't medicated. They weren't coddled. They weren't rushed emotionally either. They were just shaped by hard work and a tougher world than we have today, right? They weren't beaten, they weren't bullied by their parents. They were, for lack of a better term, they were sculpted, right? Their parents somehow, through generations and tradition, knew how to take care of kids and raise kids. And I think it was because of the hardships during that time. Nowadays, we don't have any hardships. And so kids can sit around and don't need to help their parents. They can play video games and things like that instead of the girls helping their mom cook and clean and the boys going out and working the field with dad. So there was a difference in how we live our lives, and that maybe is rubbing off on why our kids are so soft, especially our sons, and aka the men of our culture. So when I was looking into it, these forefathers of ours were raised with some certain things. So there was parental discipline. Parents themselves were disciplined. When they said they were going to do something, they did it, right? There was moral seriousness. It wasn't this wishy-washy, is this good, is this bad? It was, these are what our morals are, and we're sticking to them. It was very easy for them to tell what was right and what was wrong. Nowadays, it doesn't seem like it's that easy. You know, is deporting illegal immigrants moral or immoral? Matters who you ask. Back then, I don't think that there would have been very much argument. I think people were pretty dead on what the moral values of that were. They had clear expectations, something we don't give our kids these days. Again, we're quite wishy-washy. And responsibility from a young age. I mean, my 5-year-old back in 1776, earlier than that, would have had a lot more responsibility. He would have needed to be cleaning the chicken coops and feeding the chickens and every day getting the eggs and feeding the sheep and helping his dad with things. And he really enjoys those kinds of things. But he puts up a fight because he thinks he's too wussy to do it, right? I can't carry their food. I can't get my boots sturdy. Yeah, you can. You just haven't done it enough to know that you can do it, right? They also had fathers who enforced boundaries, which is something that a lot of people don't have today, is a father figure. I wish I knew the stats off the top of my head, but the stats are incredibly high for Black youth not having fathers. And a lot of parents are split up. And that creates a big problem when it comes to mothers and fathers raising their kids and the lack of the discipline a father would give versus the discipline that a mother would give. Mothers back in that time stabilized the emotional home, and women were much more serious back then from what I read. And at that time, they were actually quite educated. So I think of women today, and a lot of mothers aren't present for their kids. I see that with myself sometimes. Sometimes I'm working on something or reading something on the computer, and I'm like, why do you want me to look every single second? I wish I had another pair of eyes to just watch, my kids every single moment, but I'm doing things for myself as well. And so it would be interesting to have been able to see, did mothers look every single time their kids said, look at this, look what I can do? I don't know. I mean, they were in the middle of washing clothes and making food and cleaning and doing all these other things. Did they make that time? I think maybe they did. So they were the ones that stabilized the home emotionally, while the father enforced boundaries for the kids. Also, another thing, my last episode was about building community and how we lack that in our conservative culture in the US. And communities were another way that kids had their boundaries and values reinforced, right? I mean, people went to church very much more often than they do now. And they had mentors and they had different people that they saw regularly. In my household, the people that my kids see are maybe their grandparents that they see half of the year because my parents, they snowbird somewhere else. And my husband's parents live out of state, so they see them fairly irregularly. So, and we don't really have a lot of family friends. So there's not a lot of community. It's something that we lack. And so we don't have those reinforced values outside of our nuclear family, which is something that I'm hoping to work on in this next year. Maybe you want to do that with me. Another thing is that we need to have this constant reminder in our head that boys aren't going to be boys forever. Being a boy is about turning into and growing into a man, right? And so what kind of man do you want your son to be? I remember when my son was first born. I have another one on the way, and I just thought he was the cutest thing, because here is this little helpless person that will one day be a man that is going to be able to help people and be strong and do hard work and help his support his family and his wife. And just looking at this tiny little person who can't do anything, and you're there for them, raising them into this person that's going to be the everything for somebody, is, well, it's just a crazy thing to look at and realize, to say this little tiny human is going to be a man. Mind-boggling. Anyways, we have, I mean, if you look at our culture right now, I imagine it's really hard to be a young man and to be a boy growing into a man, because masculinity is treated like a disease, like it's terrible. There's this whole weird debacle in the world where children are being raised to think that, this weird skewed view of femininity, and that masculinity is bad. And so we're getting really feminine men who can't be there emotionally or physically, or I don't know, psychologically, really, for their women. And women don't even want them. And there's this epidemic of men trying to become women, which is so crazy to me. We need more strong men, and not like chauvinistic, misogynistic men, but what real masculinity is, which is being a leader and a supporter of families, right? But right now, I believe we're raising the softest generation of boys America has ever seen. And that is a huge problem for the future of this country. And I won't even get into how the women are being raised right now, because that's a whole nother problem. And that's a whole nother episode in itself. So raising strong boys instead of soft boys into men that are going to be there as patriots for our country and for the families that are yet to come, that's what we need to be working on. Right now, our parenting's weak. Our expectations of our kids are low. And our communities have collapsed. And these are all things that we need to bring back the wisdom of raising men in our society. Real men, strong men, men that are going to help each other in a community and support the future of free markets and small government in our country, right? So we've gone through that, and we can move on to what the founding era parents actually did. Some of this is pretty interesting. I think you'll like it. We'll see. So people forget that the founding fathers didn't just appear in the world, right? They actually had parents who raised them. And what were their parents like? Well, honestly, I thought it was pretty interesting that a lot of their parents, their fathers died young when they were maybe 9 to 14, and their mothers raised them. A lot of it laid on the shoulders of the mother to raise the kids. I thought that was really interesting because, yeah, being a single mom would be so tough. But then again, they did have the community back then. So here's some quotes that I thought were really interesting. George Washington said that all that I am, I owe to my mother. John Adams wrote that she planted deeply the love of truth in my heart. Benjamin Franklin said, I owe my success to the industry and frugality I was taught as a boy. He was one of 17 kids, by the way. Crazy. 17? Yikes. You got to wonder what his siblings did. I'm sure they did amazing things too. It's not like he's the only amazing one that came out of that family. Anyways, Alexander Hamilton wrote that my mother formed my mind to ambition and my heart to independence. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that his mother left his father because his father was abusive and raised him alone, and was a very outspoken woman in politics, which is pretty interesting. And so his mother shaped him and pushed for him to really have a heart for independence. And I just, it's just interesting that some of these great men were raised by strong mothers. And, for all of us mothers out there, remember that when you're raising your son, that one day we might need new founding fathers, and you could be the mother of that son, right? Or that daughter. Things are different now. Anyways, boys were taught discipline, which, was I taught discipline? I can't say that I really was. It's something that I've worked on in my whole life myself, and I'm getting better and better, right? So we've got that. Hopefully my respect for discipline, or our, as parents, respect for discipline, can rub off on our kids. Back then kids were given real responsibilities, not pretend chores, but actual things, chopping wood, things like that. Nowadays, those aren't things that we need, but there are chores that kids need to be doing, right? Boys can take out the trash. That's a pretty easy one. I'm sure my husband would love it if my son would take out the trash. I think he's a little small still. But for some of it he could do, right? So also, here's the deal. You can give them bunches of chores and things like that, but when they misbehaved, when it comes down to the misbehaving and not listening, what do we do? And so this is what they did. They didn't yell, apparently, right? They weren't beaten into fear. They weren't bribed with you can't have screen time, of course. Instead, they lost privileges, which is something that a lot of us do. They were given extra work. I just think about that with my son, and I'm like, if I gave him extra work, he would lay down on the ground and kick and scream until he didn't have to do it. And so I'm not 100% sure how that works. I wish I could go back in a time machine and find out. But there's also community accountability. So, I could go to my church and be like, can you believe what my son did the other day? And humiliation is one of the things that they used in front of the community. Is you didn't want your mom or dad telling, the pastor or the guy down the road that you respect that you did this or that. And so that was another thing, is that community accountability. The expectation was that you repaired what you damaged. So I'm just thinking about that sink in my bathroom and how on earth I can trust him to repair that. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'll give him a try. And then the clarity that no means no. I think a lot of us kind of give in before we really allow them to know that no means no. Um, this is at least what I read about how they dealt with boys back in the day. So punishment wasn't about pain, it was about the formation of discipline. So it wasn't about, like, having giving a discipline, wasn't about giving a beating. It was about teaching how to be disciplined. Um, I'm still working on this. My son's 5, but these are things that if we keep them in the back of our mind, I think we can all raise sons who are disciplined. And discipline is going to get them so far in life. So boys who learned that their choices had consequences, that's a big one. Not because their parents were cruel, but because consequences are what are a natural thing in our world. That's what the founding fathers, the mothers and fathers of the founding fathers, that's what they relied on, was natural consequences. So instead of telling your kid, you might tell them once, like, hey, if you climb that tall ladder, you could fall and get wrecked. Kids back in the day got that one warning and then they had to figure it out. So, and doctors weren't that good back then, so I don't know how I guess they just had a lot of kids and kids died and they were used to it. Terrible. Anyways, so how do we raise a boy today with that old wisdom? Our culture's lost its mind. We don't have a moral compass anymore. We don't have that community, and even us as parents weren't necessarily raised with discipline. So how do we give that back to our kids? How do we raise them in a better way than maybe we were raised? I feel like I was raised fairly well, but what can we do? So first is we can give real chores that actually matter. Since we live in a homestead, there's some interesting chores that I can give, like feeding the chickens or gathering eggs or watering plants, carrying kindling. I've been telling my kids I have a fire pit. I'd like for them every day this winter to start a fire in it. Is it dangerous? Yeah. But you learn pretty quick about getting burned. Both of them have been burned before, little tiny burns. But when you get those natural consequences, to be more careful, right? A burn hurts. So there's things like raking leaves, wiping the table down after they eat, putting their plates and spoons and cups and things into the dishwasher, bringing the compost out to the chickens. Oh boy, I tried that one today. The complaining. I wonder if kids complained as much as they do now. I can't imagine that they did, but maybe. Sweeping, shoveling snow. My kids actually love shoveling snow. I got them each their own shovel. Best. As soon as it snows, they run out there to go do it. And I kind of feel gypped because I like shoveling snow too, but they've got it. So no fake chores or busy work, but actual contributions to the family. These are things that I think all of our kids need, boys and girls. If they actually feel like they're contributing, they're more likely to do it. And it takes a lot longer because you often have to be there with them, guiding them. At least I feel like I still do. But a kid who contributes to the family feels pride for their work. I've seen it. If they contribute, they feel like they're needed in the family. And that's something that men really need, is to feel needed. I mean, I'm not a man, but having been married to one and having a son and a father, that a man is needs to feel needed by his family. And also, a boy who feels needed behaves better, because they know that they're there for everybody else, and are supporting the family, even if they're only the son in the family. I mean, a lot of times, if the father died young, the oldest son became the man of the house, right? So, moving on from that, the discipline thing. We've got to be consistent and unemotional about discipline. And that's really hard. I know it is. But boys feed off of emotion. Your meltdown is going to fuel theirs. And you can't always get it right, right? I mean, I mess up and yell all the time. But when you give an instruction, put on your shoes, and he says no, what do? They're saying, or from what I'm reading, that you should have an immediate and neutral consequence. So, look, if you don't put on your shoes, you're going to get a 10-minute timeout. If you don't put on your shoes by yourself, then you're going to be stuck inside today and you don't get to go play out in the snow. And then just walk away and let them stew on that for a little bit. Then again, a lot of us are in a hurry, so we've got to learn to slow down and take life at a little slower pace than, giving them 5 minutes to put on their shoes before you rush out the door. My life's pretty chill. I don't have those rushing moments other than when I go 1 day a week to drop my daughter off at school. But my son's forgotten to put on shoes before, and we've gotten to stores and he didn't have shoes. My favorite, though, this is great. We try to take like a 2-mile walk every day, and sometimes we go to the park. And so about a month or two ago, we walked to the park, ran out of the house. Everybody got their shoes on. We ran out of the house, and lo and behold, we get to the park and he doesn't want to get out of the stroller or the wagon. And we're like, why don't you get out? What are you doing? And it's cold in the morning, so sometimes we put blankets in there. And he forgot to put his pants on. He had shoes on, but he forgot to put his pants on. So he was so embarrassed he didn't get out. And it's never happened again. He's never forgotten his pants, right? So sometimes those natural consequences are necessary to really teach somebody what's going on. And, it's a funny memory too. But these kind of consequences and actual experiences like that are the things that a boy's going to respect. Your words, what you say, yelling, I don't really think that those are going to get us there. At least I think he just laughs at me if I yell at him or gets mad back. So it doesn't seem to work for me. Anyways, a father is another step, another thing that our sons really need. And I mean, if you're a single mom, the mothers of the founding fathers did it. So you've got this. But I'm pretty happy that my husband's there to help. And the discipline from a father is different from the discipline from a mother. And a father can be rough and tumble with his son and, do those kind of play, fight, wrestles that, show that the dad's still the boss. Even though it's like a fun game, the dad can pin the son pretty easily, especially a 5-year-old. While the mom is that emotional backbone in the family, I'd say that I'm not necessarily a fun mom sometimes. I feel like I'm a rather serious mom. And I would say I'm pretty emotionally stable. So having somebody that is emotionally stable is really going to help your son or daughter be a better person into the future. So it's a lot about working on yourself being a parent. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who don't want to be parents anymore, um, but maybe you just want to be a parent later, right? Because I didn't have my first until I was 31. And so I had a lot of experience in life before I had kids. And while I would have liked to have kids younger so that I could have more, um, I'm an older parent, I guess. So I think that gives me, less oscillations in my emotions because I've kind of figured some things out. And not everybody has that. And if you're like highly emotional, it's going to rub off on your kids. Um, the dad is helpful in being a wall for a son to push against, while a mom isn't necessarily cut out for that. And I mean, sometimes you have to be, I guess. Um, but I guess I assume that the mothers of the founding fathers gave their sons a job. Like, you need to help the family. Your father's not here. You need to help the family, and you need to be there to do this, this, and this for us. And I imagine that's kind of how it was back then. Anyways, the goal raising these kids isn't about like for enforcing compliance. It's about building a man who's disciplined enough to have strong morals and strong values. Right now, our culture kind of keeps our kids, our boys, soft and safe and medicated and entertained on their laptops and their iPads and their phones. And our government has really pushed dependency on the system. And I just think that that's I'm really against being so dependent on anything. But teaching our kids dependency, that's not the way. So when that all that's been taught, then we wonder why our kids are like unmotivated, they're disrespectful, they're depressed, they're lost and purposeless, they're just unfit for adulthood or fatherhood, and then therefore they end up leaving their kids behind and yada yada yada. So instead of raising perpetual kids, we've really got to focus on this. We've really got to work on ourselves so that we can be there and have an idea of what we're creating for the future. Because I worry so much about what's down the road for all of us and what's down the road for them. I mean, we can try to repair what's going on now so that it's a little bit easier for them, but the problems we have now are need to be fixed through generations. It took generations to get here. It's going to take generations to get out of it, unfortunately. Maybe when I'm an old woman, when we're old people, we can look back and see that things have improved, because right now, yeah, I would say it's not that improved. I look back and I say, I wish I lived in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, not in the 2025s. But, we're here where we're supposed to be. So let's figure it out. So anyways, raising our sons to be the future of America, it's a national issue. It really is. And our homes, I see our homes as a microcosm of our country. So if we have a bunch of dysfunctional families, which it seems like we have, how do we create a country that's not also dysfunctional? We don't. If we have weak boys, we have weak men, we have weak communities, we have weak politics, we have a weak nation, right? So with I just think of our country right now, and it has fatherless communities. It has boys who've never done anything hard in their lives. We have people who are addicted to screens, who can't self regulate, who act like children, get in fights in public. It's insane. We have a lot of people without purpose, which is a huge issue that maybe I can do as another podcast someday. But a lot of it has to do with these families that don't have structure, that aren't teaching discipline, and the parents never were, so they have nothing to pass down. And schools are raising boys to be soft because of rainbow flags everywhere. Masculinity is looked down upon. So when we live in a culture like that, we shouldn't be shocked to see America falling apart, because that's not what the men who created America and who fought for America did. That's not who they were. So I believe a nation is a sum of its families, and I think right now our families are weak, and I'm hoping that we can, that's what this whole podcast is about building strong families again, so that our future can be stronger. I think that our nation needs to be founded on strong families, and that's what I'm working towards, right? Towards helping us all figure out how to get there. And I don't know either, but thinking about it gets you closer to it. So we can talk all day about how our nation's collapsing, how the DOJ is corrupt, and there's a lack of accountability, and there's no justice, and there's chaos in the schools, and there's crime everywhere, and there's this immigration crisis and cultural decay. And it all matters, but I think at the heart of it, if we can raise a generation of boys who are strong, who came from strong families, who can build stronger families, who have discipline, are resilient, aren't dependent on the system. I think that these kinds of changes are the changes that Charlie Kirk talks about in his books. These are the kind of changes that we change the youth, make them stronger, and they create a stronger future. Changing things in the now is only going to do so much. We've got to start thinking longer term and look at our kids and say, I know that this world's screwed up that we're giving you, but you're strong enough to deal with it. Because if we turn them into sissies, then we're going to have a future that is quite uncomfortable. So this is the battle, and I think it starts at home, right? It's something that we need to work on. So I think that comes down to the idea that boys need hardship. Our families need hardship. People need hardship, right? I mean, if you don't have the hardships, we don't have the hardships that the founding fathers had. We have, children don't die like they did back then. Mothers and fathers aren't dying. We have comfortable lives, and without the hardships, I'm not saying we need to go back in time, but without having some sort of hardships, we grow weak. It's that whole weak men, strong men analogy. I think it's an analogy. Anyways, the weak men, strong men, hard times, easy times kind of story. Anyways, a boy without responsibility grows up selfish. If you don't have discipline, then you're dangerous because you don't know what direction to go. You drop out. You don't you don't get things done, you don't care. If you don't have examples to look up to, you're lost. If you don't have structure, then your life is chaos. That's what a lot of people's lives are now. And I think that hardship is not cruelty. That's I think a lot of people are afraid of hardship, and any type of hardship in their life, all of a sudden they're a victim. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about using hardship to form into a stronger person. And using any of those, the things that people become victims for, using those moments to become stronger rather than to become weaker. Because that's what people are doing now. People are, all this bad stuff happened to me, and so you have to understand that I'm just not going to be as good because of all these hard things that happen. And turn it around. Yes, we all have hard things that happen in our lives. We have bad things that happened. We have mistakes that occurred. We were raised by maybe a bad parent. Use those things to become stronger, not weaker. Yes, you can do that. It's your choice. And so to be a strong parent for your kids, you need to be the example of that, right? So hardship back in the day when the founding fathers grew up, they grew up in cold houses. They were raised on farms where they had to do a lot of work. They had strict routines. We don't really have those things anymore. We don't even have work that really matters, especially for kids. And so I think that those kind of hardships, they didn't break them, they grew them. And I think that that's what one of the big issues today is. Don't become a victim because of the hardships you've been through. Become stronger. Grow from those. Use those as a foundation of strength. And that's going to help our kids become leaders in the future instead of victims that expect dependency on the government. And I mean, a lot of this is just me talking about how I'm thinking about raising my kids and the things that I mull over in my day as I'm, spreading mulch or carrying the baby around the yard and feeding the sheep or what else did I do today? Moving hay bales, So I think a lot of this has to do with becoming harder people. So then there's also the bringing back community. I think that that's a really big deal. We kind of spoke about that last episode, so I'll leave that at that. And so finally, I guess I want to have a call to action, an invitation to you, if you will. It's to myself too, because I want to raise my kids to be strong. Bring back discipline into your family. Responsibility. Give them real chores. Make sure that your husband or, you are a strong figure in the family that can be a wall to your son. Can say, this is how it is. Do it this way. Don't be wishy-washy. Stop being wishy-washy. You're the dad, right? Or you're the mom. We need to have moral seriousness. We need to know what our morals and our beliefs are, and we need to make them strong points for our kids. We don't want our kids, again, being wishy-washy about, well, I don't know if that's good or that's bad. No, we want them to know. And sure, we want our kids to be able to make their own decisions, but when it comes to morality, there's good and bad. I wish I could remember the quote. It's on my calendar right now. But there didn't used to be, and there shouldn't still be, a a gray area of what's right and wrong. I think a lot of us know deep down what is right and wrong. So having that moral seriousness. We need to have high expectations of our kids. Just because they're young doesn't mean that they can't do things. And yes, it's going to take longer and it's going to be messier, but if you work on those things when they're young, they'll be better at them when they're older, right? Hardship, letting your kids deal with hardship and frustration, huge one. If they can't deal with hardship, then they are going to struggle. And I think that the hardship makes them stronger, as long as you don't tell them that they're victims instead of it building them up, right? We need to build back our communities, because without communities, we lack so much. And then we need to remember that our boys, we're not raising them to be boys. We're raising them to be strong, independent men that are going to support the community. I think that's something that we don't keep in the back of our mind all the time. We just think, oh, but there's just a boy. He's just a kid. He's just a boy, until all of a sudden he's not. And it doesn't just happen overnight. It's a gradual thing, and you've got to be there the whole time reminding them that they are heading towards manhood. All of this has to do with, yes, raising good kids that aren't going to ruin your house, but also creating a stable base of strong-willed men who are going to make America a better place into the future. We need courage. We need clarity. We don't need more comfort. We need boys that are raised the same way that the founders were raised, so that they're strong and they're there for us and they have good ideas and they aren't bought by corruption like it seems like everybody is these days. And it starts with us parents. It starts at home, and it starts with us raising our sons to be strong men. So let's try to do better as a community. Let's try to raise our kids with the soul of America in them, so that, we can look into the future and say, you know what? Some of the things that we created are scary in the future, but I know that my kids are strong enough to fix it. And that's what we're here for as parents. So hopefully that inspires you to raise your sons and be more disciplined with them, just like it's hopefully inspired me to do the same for my son. And hopefully he gets out of this phase, but as he does, I think that doing all those things is going to help him become a better kid and a better man eventually. He's only 5. Anyways, that is our episode of Homestead Republic. I'm JJ. Make sure that you keep your heart brave, because this raising children is totally something that you have to be brave about. And keep your homes bright. And I'll see y'all next week.